Participants tell us that the new schedule is, quote, life-changing. One person reports, "I wouldn't have had the time to get medical appointments, which ultimately led to the early detection of something that might have proved fatal."
Last week in the U.S. Senate, there was a hearing for a bill that would amend the Fair Labor Standards Act to, so right now, when we say that in America we have a 40-hour work week, what we mean by that is obviously not that it is, you can only work 40 hours in a week, right? Obviously. That's not what that law means. It means that that's the standard work week. That is the goal that we should set. And then you will be penalized as an employer if you have workers work more than that by paying time and a half. So that's what it means, right? You can work people really as much as you want. I don't think there's actually any at all statutory limitations on how much you can work a person, as long as you pay them time and a half after 40 hours in 1 week. So there's a bill introduced by Bernie Sanders in the U.S. Senate that would bring that down to 32 hours a week. So after 32 hours a week, that would be the new standard work week. After 32 hours, then you'd have to pay time and a half. In addition to that, his bill would actually mandate that employers pay time and a half after 8 hours in a day, even if it's not 40 hours in a work week, and double time after 12 hours in 1 day, which are both eminently reasonable in my view, and should be the law of the land already. And so should the 32-hour work week, although, I know that that's a bit more out there. It's so radical, in fact, that 54% of Republicans support it and 73% of Democrats.
And 64% overall.
Yep.
And we almost got it in the 1930s.
Yep.
We came real damn close to getting it in the 1930s.
Yeah, the Senate passed it in the 1930s. Yeah, just really, radical stuff, right? The 32-hour work week. But that's how it's being presented. The 32-hour work week is a crazy thing. But it absolutely shouldn't be. It should not be radical, and it should be the law of the land today. And it is great that UAW President Shawn Fain raised the banner for this in the UAW's contract campaign. They didn't win it, obviously. I don't think it was ever in anybody's mind that they would be able to win a 32-hour work week in this round of contract negotiations. But getting people talking about it, raising consciousness on this issue, and encouraging unions to push for it in their contracts, and encouraging legislators to amend the law is great. He spoke at the... Shawn Fain spoke at this hearing, and he talked about the importance of this bill to working people across the country. I have I've pulled a decent bit of his opening testimony, but I think it's worth it. So let's play that.
I'm here to talk about one of the most important issues to any union leader and any working class person, any U.S. senator, and any human being. And that's our time. As president of the United Auto Workers, I represent 400,000 working class people and 600,000 retirees. And I know when my members look back on their lives, they never say, "I wish I would have worked more." When people reach the end of their lives, they never say, "I wish I'd have made more money." What they wish for is they wish they had more time. And that's what work does. Work, we are paid for our time, and when we work, we are sacrificing time with other people, with family, friends, and other things we wish to do. But time, just like every precious resource in our society, is not freely given to the working class. Since the Industrial Revolution, we've seen productivity in our society skyrocket. With the advance of technology, one worker is now doing what 12 workers used to do. More profit is being squeezed out of every hour, every minute, and every second. There was a time when this phenomenon was supposed to lead to workers getting their time back, getting some of their lives back. Nearly 100 years ago, economists John Maynard Keynes, spoke of the future of workers' time. His worry that was with all the gains in productivity, we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves, and he predicted a 15-hour work week 100 years ago. You know, in my own union, I go back into our archives and I read about the fight for the 30-hour work week, an idea that was alive and well with our union back in the 1930s and 40s. But today, deep in the 21st century, we find these ideas unimaginable. Instead, we find workers working longer hours. We have workers working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. There are workers, not union or not, working multiple jobs. And they're living to work, and they're scraping to get by, and they're living paycheck to paycheck. You know, we find workers today, later in their life, working deep into their 60s, 70s, and 80s because they can't afford to retire. And we find associated deaths of despair from addiction and suicide, of people who don't feel a life of endless, hopeless work is a life worth living. You know, we have workers who feel despair as a consequence of advances in technology. Workers have been sacrificed at the altar of greed, and they've been stripped of their dignity.
So, as always, you know, very eloquent and poignant comments from UAW President Shawn Fain. And it's important to kind of reset how we think about working and how we think about our wages, because when we think about, you know, how much should you make per hour, I don't think people really understand the value of a person. They're not really thinking about the value of the person's time, that we are selling our time that is finite on this earth to a capitalist, typically, to make them a profit, right? I mean, that there's so much value in a person's time, and we don't put enough value on that, frankly. Just, you know, socially, culturally, and certainly economically. And so we have, and what he said about Keynes, thinking that we're going to have so much productivity gains, we're not going to know what to do with ourselves because we're going to have so much free time. And that is just almost exactly the opposite of what happened. In fact, time worked increased. The average time worked per week increased in the 90s. It stayed basically the same since then. And today, nearly 1 in 5 American workers work 60 hours or more. 1 in 5. 18%. That is ludicrous. That is absolutely unacceptable that 1 in 5 American working people have to work 60 hours or more per week. A full 40% work 50 hours or more per week on average. And that is despite the fact that since we passed the 40-hour work week, we are 400% more productive. 400%. We do one person in 1 hour what it would take 4 people to do in an hour when the 40-hour work week was passed. And yet we are not working less. It's absolutely unacceptable. And then when you compare us not even just to our historical, you know, it's funny because in the hearing they mentioned that actually the United States was a national leader in working hour reduction, in work week reduction last century. We were one of the first countries to adopt an 8-hour workday, or to have widespread adoption of an 8-hour workday, to have widespread adoption of a 40-hour work week. And now we have fallen so far behind that the average working person in the United States works months longer every year than a German worker does. Months. That is absolutely insane. insane that we have allowed this to happen. And the reason that this has happened is because even though we are 400% more productive, what does that mean? If you're 400% more productive, that means you are producing quadruple the value per time unit. Quadruple the value. That means quadruple the value is being created. So the question is, where is that going? And it's going to the top. They're getting more money, and we are having to work the same or more amount of hours instead of, when quadruple the value is created, we get hours reductions with our pay retained, or we get more of that value coming back to us. Maybe we work the same amount of hours or maybe even more, but we get double the salary. Neither of those things have happened in the United States. Instead, working salaries for working people have stagnated or declined in almost every industry, and the work week, like I said, has increased and stayed stagnant. All of the additional value that is coming from the increasing productivity of the American worker is going to people at the top. Absolutely unacceptable. And so the 32-hour work week is one of the many planks in a platform to bring down some of the value that we are creating and spread it among the people who actually do the work, right? So one of those is obviously increasing wages. Another is bringing back pensions. Another is decreasing healthcare costs. And another very important one is decreasing the work week. And so there are a lot of people who would oppose this on the grounds that it would make companies less productive, it would make them less competitive, and it would just be too hard on corporations to meet this demand. Well, there was a person at the hearing who has led a nonprofit study. I can't remember what it was called, but basically they got companies to opt in to a trial program for a 32-hour work week, 4 days a week, and to see what the results were. And I just want to let her tell you what the results were from these companies adopting a 32-hour work week, because it is astounding.
To date, more than 300 companies around the world have taken part in our trials. While the majority are white-collar firms, they do include all sectors: healthcare, mom-and-pop restaurants, manufacturing, construction, retail, nonprofits, IT, finance, professional services, and even a police department in Golden, Colorado. In the U.S., 78% of these are small businesses with 50 or fewer employees, which is similar to the U.S. economy. Our results have been extremely positive for both workers and the companies. We have 26 well-being measures for more than 3,600 employees, every one of which registers improvement from baseline to the end of the trial. Nearly 60% of employees experience better work-family balance. Anxiety, sleep problems, fatigue, physical and mental health improve for 40% of workers. 69% of employees have lower burnout scores. Participants tell us that the new schedule is, quote, life-changing. One person reports that had it not been for the pilot, I wouldn't have had the time or the availability to get medical appointments and procedures, which ultimately led to the early detection of something that might have proved fatal. That something was cancer. In our statistical modeling, we find that the larger the work time reduction, the greater the increase in well-being. Fewer sleep problems and less fatigue are one reason. But the second is that a majority of employees register an increase in their productivity over the trial. They are more energized, focused, and capable, partly as a result of organization-wide changes in work culture and processes. In response to methodological criticism, I will just say here that our findings are robust across time, across place, and industry, and contain a large number of variables to rule out alternative explanations. For employers, the most important number is 91%. That's the fraction of companies who have continued with the 4-day week after at least 1 full year. In the US and Canada, only 2 companies have gone back to a 5-day schedule. Their performance metrics reveal why. Resignations fell 22%. Absenteeism declined 39%. Revenue increased an average of 30%. Some companies report that quality of service improves. After losing 50% of their inpatient nurse leaders during the first 2 pandemic years, Temple University Hospital gave them a 4-day week. Patient outcomes improved, and voluntary turnover fell to 0. If the U.S. adopts a 4-day week, a 32-hour week, it is likely that hourly productivity will rise. That has been the experience of both workers and management in our trials. It is historically what scholars have concluded from past reductions in work time. And it accords with international comparisons. The countries with the highest levels of per-hour productivity are those with the shortest working hours.
Hey, 5 seconds, just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
So, I mean, really indisputable evidence there of the value of a 32-hour work week. And I think, like she mentioned, the most important metric is that 91% of companies who did the trial for a year kept the 4-day work week.
Right.
I mean, I think that is not something that I would expect.
Yeah,
right.
We have so many studies. We have evidence from other countries. We have evidence from our past. Like, it is not some wild, far-fetched idea. We know it works.
Right. Yes.
On so many levels.
Exactly. On so many levels. And obviously, and you know, the thing that we're primarily concerned about is obviously the worker well-being and the worker happiness and all this kind of stuff. And so the data is very robust about that, as it predictably is, right? And I would be in favor of a 32-hour work week, even if the numbers about productivity and efficiency and all of this stuff were not what they are, right? And so I think it's important to point that out, because I do think that even if you lost a lot, you lost some productivity, you lost the equivalent of 8 hours of work because of going to a 4-day work week, I would still support that, because I just think we work too much and we make too little, and so we should get some of our time back regardless of, you know, how much productivity the company loses, because by and large the company would have the money and does have the money to take from the shareholders and the bosses and pay another worker to fill in that gap, to stand in that gap where you lose 8 hours of productivity for moving to a 4-day work week for a person, right? And so that would actually create more jobs.
Right. That's why they were pushing for it during the Depression, right? Is you had less work available, so spread it around more equitably.
Yes. Yes. So I do want to put all my cards on the table. I support it regardless of what the productivity numbers say. But the productivity numbers are also very robust, and I think demonstrated by the fact that companies, once they adopt it, keep it. I think that is not what I would have expected, but that's what has happened. And that is what has happened even across, you know, the kind of idyllic company for a 4-day work week would be like a white collar job, right? Where you can take out coffee breaks or scrolling or something like that and just be more efficient in 4 days. I think that's kind of the thing that people can most understand, makes sense, but you've seen similar results even from manual labor type of jobs. And Shawn Fain mentioned, talked about how there have been studies, very robust and replicated studies that have demonstrated how manual laborers, when after they work 8 hours, you know, every hour that they work, they are less productive. they become less productive. And so particularly after 8 and 10 and 12 hours, once you keep somebody on the line, instead of replacing them with a fresh body, productivity just goes down the tube. And so, even that, if you actually start to think about it for a little bit, it can kind of make sense how in a manufacturing environment or in a manual labor environment, productivity, you don't actually lose the value of that 8 hours of work because it's being replaced by 8 hours of more productive labor. So that's a response to that criticism. Another criticism, which is the exact same criticism that the 40-hour work week faced, is well, actually, let's just play this because it really kind of shows how much these people hate you and hate any protections for you that are guaranteed by the government. Let's just play this.
Government should not be in the business of undermining an employer's ability to keep their doors open with unreasonable and perhaps unconstitutional mandates.
Finally, as an overall point, we commend the committee for starting a discussion about the Fair Labor Standards Act. This is one of the most litigated statutes in the country. Chairman, you're absolutely correct. We need to re-examine it.
So there you go. They're just flat out saying that the Fair Labor Standards Act is unconstitutional and it should be repealed. Not only should you not, workers, you should not get 32-hour work weeks. You do not deserve better. You actually deserve worse. We should repeal the Fair Labor Standards Act and make it so that you don't have to get time and a half after 40 hours in a week. Make it so that you don't have a minimum wage and all of that kind of stuff. They think that is unconstitutional.
Right. I mean, and this is happening at the same time that several major corporations are seeking to get the National Labor Relations Act basically nullified as unconstitutional as well, right? So, and make no mistake, far-right forces and corporate forces have been opposing, these wins from the 1930s since the 1930s, right? They haven't stopped with that, but now I think the scary thing is how much more power they have and how much more wealth they have lined up behind them. So, it's a real concern, I think, and it's a real possibility that we could be looking at labor law regimes that are from, before the New Deal.
Yes.
That should alarm every working person.
Yeah. And so therefore, this is the real issue. They said this in a later segment. This is the real issue.
I want to get back to, though, how I do disagree with trying to do anything from this place.
There you go. They just don't think that laws that help working people are legitimate. They don't think that we should do anything from this place, right? That's just the fundamental crux of it, is that, Republicans and conservative ideology opposes any use of state power to make the lives of working people better. That's the long and short, the beginning and end of it.
Right. And I just want to say there's so much more that could be done to make working people's lives better in the United States compared to just other countries, right? Not even getting into dreaming big of what's your ideal society look like, your ideal country look like. No, just compare us to the rest of the wealthy, advanced, developed world, right? Compare our conditions there.
Right.
We had a comment from William in the chat about FMLA and how that's unpaid.
Yeah.
And, that's a shame. We should have paid family medical leave in this country for everybody. Right. And I bring it up all the time in the context of Alabama educators, right? A profession that's 80% female and they don't even have paid maternity leave. Mm-hmm. And no one's even talking about it, right? That's the other frustrating thing. So I really appreciate Senator Sanders for, getting this in the dialogue and getting this out there in the conversation. Using his position as committee chair to have this hearing, to get more people this message, to have Shawn Fain there and other folks there testifying. I think that's really important. And it also reveals, what some of these Republicans are really about in terms of, admitting they don't want to do anything to help us.
Yeah. Exactly. And then finally, there is one more argument that is just that would just say that working people are lazy. The people who are pushing for a 32-hour work week are lazy. They just don't want to work. They don't want to do anything. And Shawn Fain responded to that in his opening statement, and we'll end the segment with that.
And I know what people and many in this room will say. They'll say, people just don't want to work, or working class people are lazy. But the truth is, working class people aren't lazy. They're fed up. They're fed up with being left behind and stripped of dignity as wealth inequality in this nation, this world spirals out of control. They're fed up that in America, 3 families have as much wealth as the bottom 50% of citizens in this nation. That is criminal. America is better than this. So I want to close with this. I agree there is an epidemic in this country of people who don't want to work. People who can't be bothered to get up every day and contribute to our society, but instead want to freeload off the labor of others. But those aren't blue-collar people. Those aren't working class people. It's a group of people who are never talked about for how little they actually work and produce and how little they contribute to humanity. The people I'm talking about are the Wall Street freeloaders, the masters of passive income. Those who profit off the labor of others have all the time in the world, while those who make this country run, the people who build the products and contribute to labor, have less and less time for themselves, for their families, and for their lives. So our union's going to continue to fight for the rights of working class people to take back their lives and take back their time, and we ask you to stand up with the American workers and support us in that mission. Thank you.
There you go. While we're talking about the time of workers, I want to make sure that we talk about this, and then we'll see what time it is when we wrap up. We've got 3 more segments that I had prepared for, but we may only get to this one, and that's. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.